3 years after the town laughed when he married a poor waitress, those same people stood outside his gates, begging for a single meeting. But none of them knew the truth about the day he lost everything. Marcus Walker once believed success was permanent. At 39 years old, he was one of the most respected black entrepreneurs in Texas. His technology company had grown from a tiny startup operating out of a cramped office into a business worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Business magazines featured his story. Podcasts invited him to share advice. Young entrepreneurs repeated his quotes online. Everywhere Marcus went, people treated him like a man who could not fail. From the top floor of his Dallas headquarters, he could see miles of skyline stretching across the horizon. Every morning he stood beside the glass windows with a cup of coffee in his hand, looking down at the city he loved. To most people, Marcus represented the American dream. He came from a working-class family, earned scholarships, worked multiple jobs through college, and built his company from the ground up. Nothing had been handed to him. Everything had been earned. That was why people admired him. His success felt real. His story felt possible. Yet there was something few people understood. Marcus never cared much about expensive things. Yes, he owned a beautiful house. Yes, he drove luxury vehicles. Yes, he could afford almost anything he wanted. But what mattered most to him was the future he believed he was building. He wanted to create opportunities for others. He wanted to prove that where you started in life did not determine where you could end up. For years, everything seemed to move exactly according to plan. Investors trusted him. Employees respected him. Customers loved his company. Even his personal life appeared perfect. He was engaged to a successful woman named Vanessa Reynolds. Their wedding was scheduled for later that year. Friends often joked that Marcus had somehow figured out life. Whenever people asked what his secret was, he always gave the same answer: stay focused and never stop moving forward. Looking back, those words would soon become more important than he ever imagined. Because while Marcus spent his days planning expansion projects and preparing for the future, someone much closer than he realized was quietly preparing to destroy everything he had built. The danger was not coming from competitors. It was not coming from the economy. It was not coming from strangers. It was coming from someone he trusted like family. Someone who sat beside him in meetings. Someone who knew every detail of his business. Someone who smiled while shaking his hand. And on a warm Thursday afternoon in Dallas, Marcus received a message that seemed ordinary at first, a message that would begin the collapse of the life he thought was unbreakable. By the end of that day, the first crack would appear in the empire he had spent 15 years building, and nothing would ever be the same again. The message arrived just after lunch. Marcus was reviewing quarterly expansion plans when his assistant knocked on the glass door of his office. Her expression immediately caught his attention. She looked nervous, almost frightened. "Marcus, the board members are asking for an emergency meeting." He frowned. Emergency meetings were rare. Did something happen? She hesitated before answering. "They said, it cannot wait." Within minutes, Marcus entered the conference room. The atmosphere felt wrong. Nobody smiled. Several investors sat with thick folders spread across the table. Others avoided eye contact completely. A man who had supported Marcus for nearly a decade pushed a stack of documents toward him. "We need answers." Marcus opened the file and immediately felt confusion. Large financial transfers appeared throughout the records. Millions of dollars had moved through accounts he did not recognize. Several approvals carried his digital authorization. "There has to be a mistake," Marcus said calmly. "I have never seen these transactions." Nobody responded. The silence felt heavier than any accusation. Over the next 48 hours, the situation escalated rapidly. Independent auditors began reviewing company records. Reporters somehow learned about the investigation. News websites started publishing stories. Social media exploded with speculation. Some people defended Marcus, others assumed he was guilty. Investors became nervous. Clients delayed contracts. The company stock dropped sharply. Marcus worked almost without sleep trying to understand what was happening. Then the auditors discovered something even worse. The unauthorized transactions stretched back more than 2 years. Someone had carefully hidden them behind layers of false reports and complicated paperwork. The scale of the damage was enormous. That was when Marcus finally confronted Ethan Brooks, the man he trusted more than anyone else in the company. Ethan had been his business partner for years. They built the company together. They celebrated victories together. Marcus treated him like a brother. Sitting across from Ethan in a private office, Marcus asked the question directly. "Tell me the truth. Do you know anything about this?" Ethan looked shocked by the accusation. "You think I would do something like that?" Marcus wanted to believe him. He truly did. Yet something felt different. Something in Ethan's eyes seemed distant. For the first time, doubt entered Marcus's mind. 3 days later, Ethan disappeared. His phone stopped working. His apartment sat empty. Nobody could reach him. The timing was impossible to ignore. Investigators continued digging through records. More evidence surfaced. More questions appeared. Although Marcus insisted he was innocent, the public had already reached its conclusion. Headlines painted him as a disgraced executive. Television commentators questioned his integrity. The company he spent 15 years building began collapsing around him. Then the final blow arrived. Late one evening, Marcus returned home to find Vanessa waiting inside the living room. The moment he saw her face, he knew something was wrong. She folded her arms and looked away. "We need to talk." His heart tightened immediately. Outside the large windows, the Dallas skyline glowed beneath the evening sky. Inside the house, however, Marcus felt the first unmistakable sign that his entire world was about to fall apart. Vanessa remained standing near the window, while Marcus struggled to find the right words. For years, he had imagined this house filled with laughter, family gatherings, and the future they planned together. Now the silence felt unbearable. Finally, she spoke. "I cannot do this anymore." Marcus stared at her. "Do what?" She looked down briefly before meeting his eyes. "Live with uncertainty." The words landed harder than any headline he had read that week. "You think I did this?" he asked quietly. "I do not know what to think anymore," Vanessa replied. "Every day there is another story, another accusation, another investor pulling away." Marcus stepped closer. "I am fighting this. The truth is going to come out." She shook her head. "Maybe it will. Maybe it will not. But my life cannot stay frozen while everything around you falls apart." For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Vanessa slowly removed her engagement ring and placed it on the kitchen counter. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You are leaving?" She nodded. "I am sorry." He wanted to argue. He wanted to remind her of every promise they made. Instead, he simply stood there as she picked up her purse and walked toward the front door. When it closed behind her, the sound echoed through the empty house. Within weeks, the situation became even worse. Investigators eventually confirmed that Marcus had not personally stolen any money. The evidence increasingly pointed toward Ethan. But by then, the damage had already spread everywhere. Investors had lost confidence. Major contracts disappeared. Banks demanded repayment. Assets were frozen. Properties were sold. The company Marcus spent 15 years building began breaking apart piece by piece. Employees who once filled the hallways with energy quietly packed their offices and left. One rainy afternoon, Marcus stood alone inside the nearly empty headquarters. The desks were still there. The computers remained. Yet the building felt like a ghost of what it had once been. Looking across the floor, he remembered the early days when only 3 employees worked inside a tiny rented room. Back then, they had almost nothing except belief. Somehow, losing everything now felt even harder because he knew exactly how much sacrifice it had taken to build it. A month later, the final notices arrived. The remaining assets would be liquidated. The company would officially cease operations. Marcus spent that evening sitting alone in his large house, staring at the city lights beyond the windows. Dallas had once felt full of possibility. Now every street reminded him of failure. Every building reminded him of what he had lost. Near midnight, he made a decision. He packed a single travel bag with clothes, family photographs, and a few personal items. The next morning, there were no reporters waiting, no assistants, no luxury vehicles, no meetings. Just a man carrying one bag toward a bus station. He purchased a ticket to the small Texas town where he grew up, a place he had not called home in many years. As the bus pulled away from Dallas, Marcus looked out the window one last time. He had no company, no fiancé, no fortune, and no clear plan for the future. What he did not know was that his greatest loss was quietly leading him toward the most important chapter of his life, and toward a woman who would see value in him long after the world stopped looking. The bus ride lasted several hours, and with every mile that passed, Marcus felt farther away from the life he once knew. By the time he arrived in the small Texas town where he grew up, the afternoon sun hung low in the sky. The streets looked almost exactly as he remembered. The old diner still stood near Main Street. The gas station remained across from the hardware store. Even the church bell tower looked unchanged. Yet everything felt different, because Marcus was no longer the man who had left years earlier. Carrying a single travel bag, he walked toward the small house his late parents had left behind. The property had been empty for years. Dust covered the furniture. Weeds filled the yard. The paint on the porch had faded from years of neglect. Standing at the front door, Marcus realized this was all he had left. That first night felt longer than any night he could remember. The silence inside the house seemed louder than the busy offices he once managed. When morning arrived, Marcus began searching for work. He visited construction sites, warehouses, repair shops, and farms. Some employers recognized him immediately. A few looked uncomfortable. Others seemed amused. One man actually laughed when he saw the former business executive asking about an entry-level position. "You are serious?" the man asked. Marcus simply nodded. "I need work." Unfortunately, needing work and finding work turned out to be very different things. Days became weeks. Rejections piled up. His savings continued shrinking. Eventually, Marcus accepted small jobs wherever he could find them. He repaired fences. He cleaned storage buildings. He helped unload delivery trucks. The pay was modest, but it kept him moving. The problem was that people talked. In a small town, news traveled quickly. Everyone knew about the successful entrepreneur who had returned home with nothing. Some people felt sympathy, many did not. Whenever Marcus entered local businesses, conversations often stopped. People whispered. Some openly stared. Others quietly shook their heads. One afternoon, after finishing a long day helping a ranch owner repair fencing, Marcus stopped at a small diner near the edge of town. His boots were dusty. His shirt was stained from work. Exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders. He chose a booth near the back and ordered the cheapest meal on the menu. While waiting for his food, he overheard two customers discussing him. "That is him," one said quietly. "The guy who lost everything." The other shook his head. "Imagine going from private jets to this." Marcus lowered his eyes and focused on the table. He had heard similar comments many times already. A few minutes later, a waitress approached carrying his order. Unlike everyone else, she did not stare. She did not whisper. She did not look at him with pity. Instead, she simply smiled. "You look like you had a long day." Marcus glanced up. For the first time since returning home, he saw genuine kindness in someone's eyes. Her name tag read, Naomi Carter. He thanked her and expected the conversation to end. Instead, before walking away, she said something nobody had told him in a very long time. There is nothing wrong with starting over. The simple words stayed with Marcus long after she returned to work, and without realizing it, the first chapter of a much bigger story had quietly begun. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself returning to the diner more often than necessary. At first, he told himself it was because the food was affordable. Then he claimed it was because the place felt comfortable. Eventually, however, he stopped pretending. The real reason was Naomi. There was something unusual about her. She treated every customer with respect, whether they arrived in a luxury truck or walked through the door wearing worn-out work boots. More importantly, she never treated Marcus like a fallen celebrity. She treated him like a person. One evening, after finishing a long shift unloading supplies at a warehouse, Marcus stopped by the diner shortly before closing time. Only a few customers remained. Naomi was wiping tables when she noticed him. "Long day?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "You ask me that every time?" She laughed. "And every time you look even more tired." For the first time in months, Marcus found himself laughing with someone instead of forcing a polite smile. Their conversations gradually became longer. What started as a few minutes eventually stretched into nearly an hour after closing time. They talked about childhood memories, favorite books, family traditions, and dreams they once had. During one conversation, Marcus learned that Naomi had lost both of her parents when she was young. She had spent years moving between relatives before eventually building a life on her own. Despite the hardships she faced, bitterness never seemed to find a place in her heart. That fact impressed him more than anything else. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus arrived at the diner and immediately sensed something was wrong. Naomi normally greeted customers with a smile, but that day she seemed distracted. After her shift ended, he finally asked if everything was okay. She hesitated before answering. "Just one of those days." Marcus waited quietly. Eventually, she sighed. "Sometimes people only see what you do for a living." He nodded. "I know exactly what that feels like." Naomi looked at him and smiled. "I guess you do." As they walked outside together, they passed a group of local residents standing near the parking lot. One of them recognized Marcus immediately. "Look who is here," the man said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The millionaire and the waitress." A few people laughed. Another person added, "I guess both of them are aiming lower these days." The comments hung in the air. Marcus felt embarrassment rise inside him. Before he could respond, Naomi simply kept walking. Several steps later, Marcus caught up with her. "Does that not bother you?" Naomi shrugged. "People usually judge what they do not understand." Her answer stayed with him. Over the following days, the gossip continued spreading throughout town. People noticed they were spending time together. Some found it amusing. Others treated it like entertainment. Yet neither Marcus nor Naomi seemed interested in defending themselves. Their friendship continued growing naturally. One evening, while sitting on a bench overlooking a small lake outside town, Marcus realized something that surprised him. For the first time since losing everything, he had spent an entire day without thinking about Ethan, the scandal, the investors, or Vanessa. Instead, he spent the day thinking about a woman who believed a person's value could not be measured by money. As the sun slowly disappeared below the horizon, Marcus looked toward Naomi and felt a strange sense of peace. He did not know where their friendship would lead. He only knew that for the first time in a very long time, he was genuinely looking forward to tomorrow. As summer slowly gave way to fall, Marcus and Naomi became the town's favorite topic of conversation. Everywhere they went, people seemed to have an opinion. Some thought their friendship was strange. Others openly mocked it. A few even treated it like a joke. Yet neither Marcus nor Naomi seemed interested in changing their behavior to satisfy anyone. They continued meeting after work, sharing meals, and talking about life. For Marcus, those conversations became the brightest part of each day. One Saturday morning, Naomi convinced him to help with a community cleanup project at a local elementary school. Volunteers spent the day painting classrooms, repairing playground equipment, and cleaning the grounds. Marcus agreed mostly because Naomi asked him. As they worked side by side, he noticed something remarkable. Children naturally gravitated toward her. She remembered their names. She listened when they spoke. She encouraged them without making it seem forced. Watching her interact with them revealed a side of her he had never seen before. During lunch, one little boy approached their table carrying a drawing. "Miss Naomi, look what I made." Naomi smiled and praised the picture as if it belonged in an art gallery. The boy walked away grinning. Marcus shook his head. "You're good at that." Naomi laughed. "At what?" "Making people feel important." Her smile softened. "Everybody wants to feel seen." The simple statement stayed with him. Later that afternoon, another volunteer recognized Marcus and immediately began asking questions about his past. At first, the conversation seemed harmless. Then the man mentioned the scandal, the failed company, and the financial collapse. Within minutes, several people were listening. Marcus felt the familiar discomfort returning. Before he could respond, Naomi calmly redirected the conversation and moved everyone back to work. She never embarrassed him. She never acted protective. Somehow, she simply knew exactly what to do. That evening, as they walked toward their cars, Marcus finally thanked her. Naomi looked confused. For what? For not letting that turn into something bigger. She shrugged. Everybody deserves a chance to move forward. Marcus smiled. You always know the right thing to say. Not always. Most of the time. Over the next few weeks, their friendship deepened even further. They started sharing things they rarely told anyone else. Marcus spoke honestly about the loneliness that followed his public downfall. Naomi shared stories about growing up without the stability most children take for granted. The more they talked, the more they realized how much they understood each other. Then one evening, everything changed. Marcus arrived at the diner shortly before closing time and immediately noticed Naomi seemed upset. Her smile was there, but it looked forced. After her shift ended, she finally admitted what happened. The owner of the building where she rented a small apartment had raised the rent again. Naomi was already working extra hours just to keep up. Now she was worried she might have to move. Marcus listened quietly. For a moment, he felt helpless. Once upon a time, he could have solved the problem without thinking. Now he barely had enough money to cover his own expenses. That realization frustrated him more than he expected. As they stood outside beneath the glow of the parking lot lights, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. Somehow, some way, he was going to rebuild his life. Not for status, not for recognition, but because for the first time since losing everything, there was someone whose future mattered to him almost as much as his own. The promise Marcus made to himself stayed in his mind for weeks. Every morning he woke before sunrise and searched for additional work. He repaired equipment for local businesses, helped ranch owners maintain fences, and even began fixing old electronics in his garage during evenings. The income remained modest, but something inside him had changed. For the first time since leaving Dallas, he was no longer simply surviving. He was building again. The process was slow, but it felt familiar. Naomi noticed the difference almost immediately. One evening, she stopped by his house after work, carrying takeout from the diner. As they sat on the porch eating dinner, she smiled. "You seem different lately." Marcus looked at her. "Different how?" "More focused." He laughed softly. "I guess old habits are hard to break." Naomi nodded. That is not a bad thing. The truth was that she had become his motivation. Every time he thought about giving up, he remembered her working double shifts without complaining. Every time he felt sorry for himself, he remembered how she continued smiling despite the challenges she faced. Slowly, their friendship became something deeper. Neither of them said it out loud, but both felt it. One Saturday afternoon, the town hosted its annual fall festival. Families filled the streets. Food vendors lined the sidewalks. Local musicians performed near the town square. Naomi convinced Marcus to attend, even though he initially resisted. "You spend too much time working," she told him. "For one day, come enjoy yourself." Reluctantly, he agreed. As they walked through the crowded festival together, people noticed them immediately. Some smiled. Others whispered. A few openly stared. Marcus ignored it. He was too busy enjoying the rare feeling of normalcy. For several hours, they wandered through booths, sampled food, and laughed more than either expected. Then they ran into someone from Marcus's past. Vanessa Reynolds. She was visiting family in the area and happened to be attending the festival. The moment she saw Marcus, surprise flashed across her face. For a second, neither moved. Naomi sensed the tension immediately. Marcus introduced them politely. Vanessa smiled, but it looked forced. "You seem to be doing well," she said. Marcus glanced at Naomi before answering. "Better than I was." After a brief conversation, Vanessa excused herself and walked away. Yet the encounter left Marcus unsettled. Later that evening, as he and Naomi sat near the lake watching the sunset, she finally asked the question she had been avoiding. "Do you ever miss her?" Marcus remained quiet for several seconds. Then he answered honestly, "I miss who I thought she was." Naomi looked down at the water. "That makes sense." Marcus turned toward her. "What about you? What about me? Have you ever been disappointed by someone you trusted?" Naomi smiled sadly. "More times than I can count." For a moment, silence settled between them. Then Marcus reached for her hand without thinking. Neither pulled away. Neither spoke. As the last light disappeared beyond the horizon, both understood something important. Their lives had brought them together during their hardest seasons, and what they were feeling was no longer friendship alone. The only question was whether either of them would find the courage to say it first. For the next several days, neither Marcus nor Naomi mentioned what happened by the lake. The memory lingered between them like a quiet secret. Yet something had undeniably changed. Their conversations felt warmer. Their smiles lasted longer. Even simple moments carried a different meaning. Marcus found himself looking forward to every opportunity to see her. Naomi felt the same, although neither was quite ready to admit it aloud. Then, on a chilly Tuesday morning, Marcus received an email that immediately caught his attention. At first, he assumed it was spam. The sender represented a technology investment group based in California. Normally, he would have ignored it. Instead, curiosity convinced him to open the message. As he read the contents, his expression slowly changed. The firm had been researching leadership case studies involving entrepreneurs who overcame major business setbacks. During their research, they discovered details surrounding the collapse of Marcus's former company. More importantly, they had uncovered information confirming that he had been cleared of wrongdoing long ago. The email ended with a surprising request. They wanted to schedule a virtual meeting. Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief. For nearly a year, nobody from the business world had contacted him for anything meaningful. Suddenly, a respected investment group wanted to hear his ideas. That evening, he showed the message to Naomi. She read every word carefully before looking up. "This is huge." Marcus shook his head. "It is probably nothing." Naomi immediately disagreed. "You do not know that. What if they are wasting my time?" She folded her arms. "And what if they are not?" Marcus smiled. One of the things he loved most about Naomi was her ability to see possibilities when everyone else focused on obstacles. 2 days later, he joined the video call. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. Instead of asking about the scandal, the investors asked about leadership, innovation, and the future of technology. They wanted to hear how he would build a company if he started from scratch today. By the end of the meeting, Marcus felt something he had not experienced in a very long time: excitement. A week passed, then another. Life returned to normal. Marcus continued working. Naomi continued her shifts at the diner. Gradually, he convinced himself nothing would come from the meeting. Then everything changed. Late one Friday afternoon, his phone rang. The call came from California. One of the investors spoke directly. They wanted Marcus to fly to San Francisco. Their group was considering funding a new technology venture, and they wanted him to lead it. For several seconds, Marcus could not speak. The opportunity felt unreal. After ending the call, he drove straight to the diner. Naomi was finishing her shift when he walked inside. The moment she saw his face, she knew something had happened. "Marcus?" He smiled wider than she had ever seen. "They want me in San Francisco." Naomi covered her mouth in shock. Tears immediately filled her eyes. In that moment, neither of them realized it yet, but the life they had been building was about to change forever. The trip to San Francisco felt surreal. Just a year earlier, Marcus had been sitting alone in a nearly empty house, wondering whether his future had ended. Now he was boarding a plane with an opportunity he never expected. Throughout the flight, he replayed every possible outcome in his mind. What if the investors changed their minds? What if he disappointed them? What if this was only a temporary distraction from reality? Yet every time doubt appeared, he remembered Naomi's voice. She had believed in him when he struggled to believe in himself. When Marcus arrived in California, the investment group welcomed him warmly. Over the next several days, they introduced him to executives, engineers, and industry leaders. They reviewed his ideas, challenged his assumptions, and asked difficult questions. Instead of feeling intimidated, Marcus felt alive. The same passion that had built his first company slowly returned. He spent hours sketching plans, discussing innovations, and outlining a vision for a new technology platform. By the end of the week, the investors reached a decision. They wanted to move forward. More importantly, they wanted Marcus to lead the project. The funding package was substantial. The resources were real. The opportunity was larger than anything he imagined. For a moment, Marcus simply sat in silence after hearing the news. Then he smiled. Not because of the money, not because of the title, but because for the first time since everything collapsed, he had proof that his story wasn't over. The first person he called was Naomi. When she answered, he could barely contain his excitement. "They approved it." Silence filled the line for a second. Then she laughed and cried at the same time. "I knew they would." Hearing her happiness somehow meant more than hearing the investor's decision. Over the following months, Marcus divided his time between California and Texas. The new company grew quickly. Industry publications began covering the story. Journalists who once reported on his downfall now wrote about his comeback. Articles highlighted how he had rebuilt his life after losing everything. As his profile increased, old acquaintances started reaching out. Former colleagues sent messages. Business contacts wanted meetings. Even people who had disappeared during his hardest days suddenly remembered his phone number. Marcus remained polite, but he never forgot who stood beside him when there was nothing to gain. Back home, the town noticed the changes too. The same residents who once whispered about him now followed every article they could find. Conversations shifted. Opinions changed. Respect slowly replaced mockery. One evening, after returning from another business trip, Marcus met Naomi at the lake, where they had spent so many quiet evenings together. The sun was setting, painting the water with shades of gold and orange. As they sat side by side, Marcus reached into his pocket and removed a small velvet box. Naomi immediately looked at him in surprise. His heart raced despite everything he had accomplished. Building companies suddenly felt easier than this moment. Looking into her eyes, Marcus smiled and spoke softly. "There is something I should have said a long time ago." Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel